In the history of economic thoughts, now we come across another philosopher that is known as Plato, one of the most influential Western philosophers. He is really intellectual and he was also a disciple of Socrates. The history of economic thoughts within Plato is that Plato always wanted a hierarchical society. He wanted a society of communal well-being. He didn't wanted private property. One of the most important and one of the most famous concept of Plato is the ideal city state. Now, what was the ideal state system? He said that the ideal state must be governed by the really intellectual person or a philosopher king. Further on, Plato always wanted that the philosopher king must use his own reasons to govern his state. He was an authoritarianism and also an elitist, and a system that must be hierarchy governed. The founding contribution of Plato, or the contribution of Plato in which we can see the ideal state system, is the Republic and the Law. These are two of the most influential book of Plato. Now, what was ideal state and how it is hierarchical? So mainly Plato analogy the human soul. The human soul analogy is that according to Plato, the human soul work on a hierarchy. First, human reason, like they use their own reason. Secondly, they have spirit and will. Spirit and will is the courage or something like you want something and you work for that. And the last thing is desire. Now, the desire, he said that the last and the really ignoble thing for a human soul is to fulfill their own desires. He also structured the hierarchical system of external state, or the ideal state is that first there must be a philosopher king. A philosopher king is a person that is wisest and he think on the state, while the second one would be guardians who would protect the city from aggressions, and also they would create dystopia or tyranny over other states. And the last one, that are producers. Producers are the despite peoples, the laborers and the producers which can have the economic output, and these economic output is really beneficial for the philosopher king and for the guardians. Lastly, the philosophical justification for this hierarchical system is that Plato stated that if internal system is hierarchically governed, so the external system must be hierarchical governed. And it was really pernicious idea because it led to a disastrous end of a communal system. Now, further on, if we see that how the elite people would live, so Plato identified that the elite people would live in a pure form of communism. What is the pure form of communism? That the elite and the guardian, they would share their meals, they would live in a structure where there is no private property, even their marriages and their children are also in commune. They also said that philosopher kings and the guardians aren't allowed to marry by their own wishes. The state would do their own, like they would choose their living partner according to the animal husbandry. Now, further on, their own happiness is completely irrelevant. Only the happiness of the polis is important. They also said that the individual rights, they are not really important. The thing that must have, like that increase the polis, or that increase the production of the polis, or that have like the polis work harmoniously according to that. So for that thing is really important in the ideal city state. Further on, if we see now how they used something that can maintain the control of the city state. So they said that the philosopher king would spread a noble lie. What is the noble lie? The noble lie is that we are the chosen people from the God have sent us mainly to address this society, to control this society, and so that we can have like empathy with you and we can control you people, we can govern you people, so that you must be prosperous. Now, what they said that to the other classes is that that they are always born inferior, and the guardians and the philosopher king, they are always born superior. So that's why they must rule. Further on, Plato also addressed the freedom, that there must be no freedom, no thoughts must be governed, only the philosopher king must have thinking. No other people would think on these things because it would spread a thought that would disturb their controlled society system. They also censored the arts. Arts is censored. Nowadays, you can also see that in those authoritarian cities or those authoritarian states, mainly art and thinking is prohibited, because it mainly led to the thoughts which can mainly disturb your polis, and that is really dangerous for your polis. So that's why Plato addressed that this must be censored. Further on, they also said that citizens life, they must be policed, and the policing must be moral, like they can't do anything that can like disturb the police, or that can overthrow the police. So the policing and the monitoring of the state must be important, and if anybody that have dangerous thoughts or ideas, that must be policed, and they should go to prison, or they would have the consequences of having those thoughts. Now further on, if we see what Plato addressed for the economy, like if we see the ideal state system, so it's mainly a political concept, but the economic system of the Plato is that Plato really addressed that there must be private property. Private property, not division of labor. Now, the division of labor is according to the human nature, because is in the dialogue of the Republic, Socrates addressed that we all are not same. We have diversities, and the diversities in the division of labor, that's mainly according to human nature. Most of the things Plato addressed are according to the human nature. So they said that the division of labor, it would mean it is according to the human nature, because humans, they are diverse. Further on, he said that the division of labor, they can increase the production, also it can increase the exchange, because if different people produce different things, so they can have exchange later on, and they can trade things for each other. So it would also increase the economic output of the society, and it would helpful for the philosopher-king or for the guardians. Despite of all its division of labor, Plato also morally ranked the production as ignoble, and also not so much moral. He always ranked the top the philosophy or the philosopher kings, or the things that is relevant to the thinking. Further on, if we see in the time of Plato, there was a coinage system that was developed in Lydia, that is in the early 7th century BC. It also really in later time, the gold and silver, they would be traded. Now Plato identified that it's out of the control, and if it's out of the control, so it's really dangerous for your polis. So that's why Plato identified that we must have another fiat currency which would be controlled completely by the state, and we would have a complete control on it. If we have a complete control on it, so nobody can control us, and nobody can overthrow our system. Now, if we see later on in the time, Plato also addressed the money and trade system, is that because he always say that the money and the trade and these kind of things, they are really ignoble. So he also said that the fiat currency, that must be there, and if anybody that import gold or silver, they must be thrown away from the city state, or they would have be in prison. Now, if we see what he saw about the state, so he was really pernicious about it's really pernicious that anybody can think and have economic growth, because it would create disturbance in the staticism, because he was mainly a statist person. He didn't want a dynamism. If there is a dynamism in a society, so it would have thoughts, and it would change the system of the police. He was also really afraid from the population growth. That's why he said that there must be 5,000 agricultural landlord families, not above that, because if there is a lot of population, so we can't control them, and if we can't control them, so then it would be really dangerous for the police. All of the thoughts are really gathered around the police, more of the thoughts of the Plato. If we see in the modern times, Plato is also discussed. Plato always in history, Plato is discussed really like a founding figure, because Plato gave the first concept of communal rights, and Plato gave the concept of the division labor. So modern people and modern economists also discuss Plato, they debate Plato. But if we see the human nature is that it want freedom in their own choices. They want change, because humans are in a constant flux. But if you want something that is static, so it's opposite to the human nature. The modern criticism is that the Plato thoughts are opposing the human nature, and also the modern thoughts is that the noble lie that control the state, it's really dangerous, because if further on the noble lie disturbs, so all of the state politics, or all of the police organizations would drop down, and it would collapse. Also, there is some more things, that is to maintain justice and to maintain governance. You don't need a noble lie. You must have to understand the people, and you have to have the policies according to the people. This was all about Plato and the modern criticism of the Plato.